to listen to the mainstream media, you would think that America is turning into a lawless, crime-ridden place where people are stealing food from stores, breaking into pharmacies at all hours of the day, right? America is just a crime hellhole. If you listen to the mainstream media, that's what you would be hearing. In fact, last week, corporate media, CNN, MSNBC devoted a ton of time to this, where they melted down over this video. I don't know if you saw this video that was being shared by the New York Post of a man allegedly stealing packages of meat. Did you guys see this? If you guys missed this, here's this man, right? The New York Post got this video. He's leaving a Trader Joe's. I know where that Trader Joe's is. I used to live right near there in Manhattan. So he's leaving, and he has a whole thing of meat in his hand, and he's leaving, right? And apparently, like, this is indicative of the crime that is now sweeping the nation. It was no surprise then that Fox News jumped all over this, right? So that's the thing with this show, right? On the one hand, like, I can point out that Fox News did some great reporting on the Hillary Clinton story, and then I can jump all over them and MSNBC for exploiting this video from the New York Post. And, you know, hey, the millionaires on MSNBC who went on a whole tirade about this and talking about how this is indicative of further evidence of a surge in lawlessness across the city, in big cities, particularly petty thefts from retailers, right? I don't know if you saw this, Reverend Al Sharpton was on this MSNBC panel, and he was saying, I can't even go to a pharmacy because it's so bad now. They've got all the things I need. They're all locked up behind a thing. You need to ask somebody with a key to come unlock it because people are stealing it left and right. There's not much evidence at all, actually, to justify this.
That is true in San Francisco. That is happening big time. That there are companies even talking about pulling out of those areas because they have basically made anything under, I think it's $1,000. The police don't even do anything to. So there has been a mass amount of people taking things from CVS's and stuff like that to where they're having to lock things down. I don't know if it's the same case in New York, but I know that it's gotten completely out of control in San Francisco.
Well, there's this sort of great, Atlantic did a great piece about this, the great shoplifting freakout, and why it's so hard to figure out if America's enormous surge in theft is real. And they point out that no, in fact, it's not. More stores are open now than they were before because during the pandemic they were closed. So there really isn't a spike at all in the number of thefts. And it's being blown out of proportion. But the mainstream media wants you to think that it's absolutely, a huge problem. Like video man stealing 10 steaks from a New York City Trader Joe's. And then MSNBC says that America is collapsing in crime and we need more police. We need more police. We need more policing. And that's the problem. That President Biden, you need to step up. You need to hire more cops. That's the problem. Not that America is hungry. Not that America is hungry and actually needs food. How about that as the narrative? So they caught up with this man, by the way. Turns out he's homeless. Okay, this guy's homeless. And he explained, he's like, I'm just trying to eat. So he said, not that what he did was justified. I'm not saying at all that this was justified. But what is the problem here? It's not that he's taking this so he can go sell this someplace. It's that he's homeless and he doesn't have anything to eat. So why don't we talk about that? Why don't we talk more about that in the United States rather than we need to increase the number of police officers on the street? Like, that's the problem?
Well, and that's the thing. Like in San Francisco, they've decriminalized it up to a certain, like up to $1,000 or whatever. So the police can't even do anything anyway. So, I mean, I've seen a lot more examples of this than, there was, I don't know what that comedian is in New York. The guy that was in several movies. He's the blonde guy. He's really into basketball. I know if you saw him, you'd know who I'm talking about. But he would
Rappaport?
Yeah. So he was in a store and he made a video of a guy that was doing the same thing, just loading up a bag and taking groceries out. And if you look at San Francisco, I mean, it really is running rampant. It is out of control, so much so that they're trying to figure out what they can do. And like I said, they decriminalized it. So I think it is happening more than we think it is. But is it as widespread? I don't know. But the thing is, like, it's not just people that are needing food in San Francisco. They're going in and stealing hair products and just whatever they can get their hands on.
Well, according to the Atlantic piece, the incidents these stories are using to illustrate are exactly what you're using to illustrate here, which is this in San Francisco. And he says these incidents, these stories used to illustrate the problem are genuine mayhem. At a Bay Area Nordstrom, police say as many as 80 thieves executed a coordinated attack on the store. At another Nordstrom, this one in Southern California, thieves were caught on video assaulting workers with bear spray. At a Louis Vuitton boutique in Illinois, more than a dozen robbers overwhelmed sales clerks and made off with $120,000 in loot. Before dawn on a November day in New York City, thieves used a hammer to smash their way into a closed boutique and left with $80,000 in designer clothes. But wait, are we still talking about shoplifting? And as the piece points out, no, we're not. Recent news stories described a shoplifting surge, but this narrative conflates an array of varying, very different offenses in a single crime wave said to be cresting right now all over the country in a frenzy of naked avarice and shocking violence. Smash and grabs are awful, but they're pretty rare and already very much felonies. Nevertheless, a handful of viral videos and some troubling statistics from retailers and industry groups have sent Americans on edge during the year's most economically essential shopping season, wondering if the mall where they buy their Christmas presents might be next. The deeper you search for real objective evidence of an accelerating retail crime wave, the more difficult it is to be sure that you know anything at all. So that's what I want to do. I want to caution all of you. Like when you see these anecdotal reports on TV, or what we're just talking about here with these sort of smash and grabs in San Francisco and other places, that where are these industry groups leaning? They're leaning towards more policing, right? That's what they're leaning towards. And the mainstream media and the millionaires over at MSNBC are exactly falling for this bait, hook, line, and sinker. So to listen to Joe, I was trying to get the soundbite and I couldn't. To get Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski, who each are making like $8 million per year, they're up for their contract negotiations. Like, we need the police. We need more police on the streets because I want to feel safe. I'm a millionaire and I need to feel safe. Okay, but can we look at the actual problem right now with America's food insecurity and the people in the United States that are hungry? We are seeing a huge class disparity in the United States, and the haves and the have-nots. And we see real food insecurity in the United States. We see families that are going hungry, okay? And that's being underreported because these millionaire broadcast networks, these billionaire broadcast networks want to focus on these viral videos, and they want to say that it's all down to policing.
Well, but to be fair, in Portland, Oregon, for instance, you've got, I think they're down to like 700 and some odd cops now for the whole city of Portland. And so you're having a lot of murders and stuff now. You're having a lot more theft. Like there was somebody that was just murdered this weekend that was wearing a Trump something, and they just like murdered the person. And that the crime rates are up so high because they do not have enough police in Portland to deal with it, because the Portland police don't want to stay because they're, all of this stuff is happening. The crime is up. And so I believe, maybe I do believe the media conflates stuff. And I do believe there is food insecurity in this country. I mean, the bills that they're passing where they're talking about, we're taking care of like 40% of hungry kids or whatever. I don't think there should be a hungry person in a rich country like this, but I do believe that there is more to this story than they even know, because like you don't have to watch much news here in Portland to see that it is a policing issue here.
But see, I think they're using that as an excuse. I mean, because this, what all these millionaires on television are ignoring is that you have homelessness, you have rampant homelessness, right? People being pushed out of, they don't have no place to live now. They can't go to homeless shelters because those are overrun. America's affordable housing crisis right now, we don't have enough homes, so they have no place to live. And we have food insecurity because they can't afford the food with rampant inflation and more, right? And more problems as a result of that. So they have no stimulus, no money to help families, affordable housing crisis in the United States, people on the streets. And I think what's happening is the story of this sort of, that's at the heart of all of these viral videos, this massive move of misery or whatever, reports of people stealing meat and sodas. Like suddenly people are like resorting to desperate measures. It's not because of lax law enforcement. Like someone stealing meat is not because there's a lack of cops. That's what's
No,
missing.
but I
this.
think
you know what I mean.
Yeah, I agree, and I have no problem with people taking food if they need food. But the problem is that's like the Louis Vuittons and stuff. I think the two are getting kind of in the way of each other because
I think that's what the Atlantic piece is pointing out, is that they're being that's exactly what the Atlantic piece says, is they're conflating these two. Like someone breaks into a Nordstrom, steals $80,000 worth of stuff. That happens anyway, not just because of this situation, and it's happening and it's totally separate from someone who's homeless or can't afford to eat and has no food in the United States.
I agree, but the reason that people are willing to go break in and take these things now is because of the lack of policing in these areas. So San Francisco, like I said, they've really made lax policing laws where the police their hands are tied in so many situations, and that does lead to those people like, oh, we can just go grab these bags now. We can go into CVS and grab all this stuff that's not edible. You know, they're not doing it because they're hungry. They're doing it because, you know, they can probably sell that stuff or whatever. So I think it's a combination. But the food thing, I think, is if it's a homeless person and it's food, that is completely different. And I don't want to see those two grouped together. But when we're talking about the other theft, I believe that it is a police issue because the presence is so low that they're just like, well, we can go do this. And like, I think they had like 30 cars or something had pulled up to the mall and they all ran in and got those bags. Apple has had mass, people coming in and grabbing phones. Best Buys are having to lock their phones down because people there was somebody in, I can't remember where I was doing a studio build somewhere, and somebody drove their car into the front of a Best Buy and went in and grabbed all of their phones and stuff and then drove out. So it's like, it does happen a lot. And I don't know, like, if everywhere it's because of policing, but I know that, you know, if some of these cities like San Francisco that are making lax laws to where it's like $1,000 before it's even a crime, I don't see how you're not going to have that stuff happen.
Recent U.S. Census survey shows that food scarcity has increased 73% in the New York metro area. 73%.
Now, is that since the pandemic?
No, since last spring. Yeah, since last spring. 73% since last spring. With more than 15% of people in the region saying that sometimes or often they don't have enough food to eat. This number is up 65%.
But we just put how much? 750 some billion into war?
Yeah.
And we couldn't take a couple billion for food?
And I just, I come back to this. I just get bothered. I'm just bothered by the way that the media portrays this, right? So they're, Joe Scarborough's laughing about it. He's like, please, sir, can I have some more? Where are the police? We got to get the police on the streets. He's making $8 million a year, right? So he's concerned as a New York millionaire about these steaks being stolen, and it's a police issue. When no, in fact, it's a food scarcity. It's a food insecurity issue is at the heart of it. I guess what I'm trying to do is unpack this a little bit further. I know it's a little bit of a dense subject here, but I think David Sirota over at the Daily Poster did it some justice, and his team. He says data shows that these crimes are in fact on the rise, but they are still taking place at lower levels than before the start of the COVID pandemic. So in reality, we're seeing a surge in thefts over 2020 numbers. That's everything was closed in 2020. So when you look at the numbers, they're actually, yes, it's going, everything is going to be different than 2020, right? So more stores are open, fewer people are shut in at home, but that doesn't mean an unusually high number of thefts are actually taking place, he says. He says, but some journalists would rather go with their gut than rely on cold, hard facts. And that's what we try to do here on the show, is to bring you facts on these. So when you see these when you see these news articles, when you see your Fox News, your MSNBC showing this guy stealing steaks and talking about how it's because of a lack of policing, understand the difference to what David's talking about, right? Smash and grab Louis Vuitton stores is different than someone who has food insecurity. You cannot lump them all together. And that's what the United States is dealing with right now. I said a recent U.S. Census survey shows that food scarcity has increased 73% in New York, with more than 15% of people in the region saying there's sometimes or cannot eat. They have no food to eat. That's up 65%.
The sad thing is too, like when we gave all the stimulus and everything out during the pandemic, which we should have done a lot more, but those people, a lot of the people that are still in this food insecurity, they didn't get anything. Those are the people that when we always talk about the people who need it the most don't get it. Those are the people who got no help during the pandemic. And then there are people that lost their job at no fault of their own during the pandemic. So we've had an increase in people that need food. So,
Right.
and then you've got a lot of places that were closed down and everything. So it makes sense that you would see that when you see nothing. Like, you cannot lock down, like we said at the very beginning, you cannot lock down an economy and not help them through it. Every other country helped their citizens through this pandemic. We did nothing, and especially nothing for the people who needed it the most.
Well, and you bring up a great point, and it's so much easier as the media to make a headline to scare you, right? It's so much easier for the media to put on coming up tonight at 6:00, coming up tonight at 6:00 on your evening news, America's crime wave, is it safe to leave your house? News 4 investigates, or could you imagine them leading their show? And they would never do this with, like, America is hungry, because their corporate overlords wouldn't allow it. It's much sexier for the corporate overlords that run these big media companies to push for more policing, to push for more funding for the police state. Absolutely more of their concern. But for them to lead their broadcasts with, Americans don't have enough food to eat. Americans are hungry. Americans are homeless because they can't afford housing. They're not going to lead with those stories because it doesn't fit that corporate narrative. Joe Scarborough, like, some journalists would rather go with that narrative instead of unpacking this and talking about the real story here, which is that people are starving. People are, you can't afford healthcare in the United States, and it's a freaking mess.
Well, that's why I get so pissed off when I hear them say, when you hear the Democrats say, this bill's going to help, decrease child hunger or child poverty by 40%. It's like they're bragging about that, like the other 60% is fine. It's like the same thing with hunger. We could end hunger with what we spend on one day of war in this country, not worldwide. But it's like, we don't do it. And then we sit there and brag that we've decreased it by 40% or 30%. Like, that's some big thing.
I mean, you think about, similarly, roughly 36% of people in the New York metro area say it's been somewhat or very difficult paying for usual household expenses lately. Let me know in the chat. All of you watching right now, has it been more difficult for you to buy basic household expenses right now? Let me know in the chat. A 20% increase since last spring, according to census data. I mean, 10% of people in the United States are facing food scarcity, a 17% increase since last spring. But corporate media wants to focus on the stolen meat video and talk about how this is a lack of policing and totally taking it out of context. Joe Scarborough on a network that pays him $8 million a year, instead of using the opportunity to argue against a problem in the United States, saying that instead Democrats should crack down on petty thefts. And this is an example of Democrats trying to defund the police and the whole thing, and that whole argument, which, was a huge mistake for Democrats to go down that rabbit hole to begin with. But
anyway. Real quick, how can they just think that with all this inflation, that this isn't just going to get worse and worse? There are people who have jobs, who have decent jobs, that aren't going to be able to afford things much anymore. Like, if you're having to commute and paying $4 a gallon in gas, and you're going to get meat and it's like $6 a pound now instead of $3 or whatever, like, your cost of living has doubled, but your wage hasn't increased at all.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, and Social Security, we have a cost of living increase for Social Security, does nothing, virtually nothing. I see so many people here in the chat. Darlene saying I had to max out my credit cards. Lena says yes, and the rent is no better. Nefak says it hasn't been difficult, but it's for sure got way more expensive. My kids left the house. My kids have left the house. Kimchi says, oh my God, their water bill. Lita Westcott says my COLA, the cost of living raise, was $75, but my rent went up $50. So yeah. So now rent goes up. Rents are, increasing at such a fast pace. There's no way that these wages are keeping up.
No, I mean, you could have, like, if you were a good employee or employer, you could have said, okay, the economy, like it's 7%. What's the word I'm looking for? The inflation is 7%. Give them a 10% raise. Like, it's not a lot, but at least it can cover the inflation.
Right.
They're not even covering that. So some people's costs have doubled, and they're getting nothing out of it. So you're going to have people that have jobs that have a roof over their head that are still going to have to steal food potentially because their wages haven't gone up.
Like Becky Medved's in our chat says, I worked in a supermarket a while back and saw a guy stealing baby formula. He looked at me and said, please don't tell. Jeez Louise.
Jeez.
Unbelievable. If you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, we have a membership program. For the price of a cup of coffee once a month, you can support independent journalism just by going to morninginvest.com/join.
You get access to exclusive videos, plus the ability to